Calvin, Don and the Western Pacific make for an active tropics on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for July 15th. So 3 active storms, 2 of them named, one of them probably ought to by now, and we've got 29 so far this year. We're not counting Don because it's subtropical, but for those keeping notes, we will be making a subtropical count as well at the end of the season. But Calvin is still the strongest storm, but we'll go over that in a moment. Day 45 of Atlantic hurricane season, and Subtropical Storm Don is holding on to 40 mile per hour winds, which is just about tropical storm strength. Subtropical storm strength, I'm going to keep making that mistake, and it's going to meander around the Atlantic throughout the next few days. In the Eastern Pacific, it's day 63 of hurricane season. We've got Hurricane Calvin, which may have surprised some when it intensified rapidly to a strong Category 3. It now looks like it's about to be weakening substantially, and we've got a 10% chance further east as well. 4W has developed into a tropical storm in the South China Sea near the Philippines, and that could strengthen quite a lot before it heads towards the coast of China, and it could make landfall there as a Category 2 or 3 later on down the line. 3 other areas of interest right now, 2 10% on either side of 4W pretty much, and a 30% chance, the one I'm pretty much eyeing up more than the others, near Palau, that could end up becoming our next substantial typhoon if the others don't. North Indian Ocean still quiet, but a few thunderstorms blowing up in the region that ought to be taken note of. Last 24 hours looks like this. Look out for any red zones. You'll see a few around the Western Pacific there, South China Sea. 4W and what's led up to it has produced a lot of rainfall over the entire region, particularly over the Philippines. I'm not sure how the situation is there, but I imagine there will be some flooding concerns. Here's the latest satellite imagery of Calvin. It looked really good earlier today, and it's a bit of a shame that we missed any update windows that we could have caught when it was at peak intensity, but we were covering different systems. Nonetheless, you can see its movement towards the west-northwest, and it really is, it did look excellent and is now starting on that weakening trend as it continues towards the west-northwest over cooler sea surface temperatures. It should still get to Hawaii, though, as a rather weak system. Atlantic Ocean then looks like this, and once we switch over to the infrared, you can see Don, and it's really not a looker, it has to be said. Here's the shortwave infrared. We'll try and get the best view there, nighttime imagery, and you can see the center is around there, quite decoupled from the upper levels, and I thought it was going to sort that out earlier on today, but it appears to have become a little bit more of a problem, if anything, and it's really struggling to hold on to those cloud tops and the gales which will undoubtedly be associated with it. Sea surface temperatures in the Eastern Pacific are fairly warm still off the coast of Mexico, pushing 30 degrees or more. Out at sea, Calvin is entering those cooler areas now, probably going to be quite quick to weaken. The Atlantic Ocean, an extremely warm area around the Florida Keys, which has been well publicized, up towards 34 degrees Celsius, which is remarkable. Around the Bahamas, around 32 degrees, and further north up the Gulf Stream, some really good conditions extending quite far and wide. The Western Pacific, another story here of very large areas with very warm sea surface temperatures. Not that much above average, but they are very warm. South China Sea, that's where there's a lot of energy right now, and that's part of the reason why we're seeing enhanced rainfall over the area due to all of that heat. The North Indian Ocean still fairly warm in a few spots, 30 degrees, and 1 or 2 swathes of very warm waters appearing in the Arabian Sea, possibly where winds have abated a little bit. Southwest Indian Ocean, though, is pretty chilly now in the off-season, of course, so not much to say there. The Australian region also still cooling as we get towards the middle of winter over there and into the southern Pacific. Around Fiji, temperatures just dropping below 26 degrees on the south coast. The anomalies look like this. As a matter of fact, the Western Pacific open waters there are pretty much normal. The South China Sea, though, is well above average, and the Eastern Pacific is slightly above average in the east and a cool pool in the west. It's the Atlantic, really, that's the real story, well above average in a few spots around Florida and the Bahamas, as noted, and in the Eastern Atlantic, 3 degrees above average, possibly a little bit higher than that in 1 or 2 spots over there. Very warm conditions. Oceanic heat content also looks like this. The Caribbean really getting a lot of energy there. If any storms go over that area, they've got a good chance in the peak season. Eastern Pacific is slowly gathering more pace as well. Along the coast of Mexico is the best area. And in the Western Pacific also large areas of good conditions. I think it's gone off the boil slightly looking at that image, but it's still very good. GFS computer model for the next 5 days shows this for the Atlantic, with Don there scooting about towards the north and then turning east and then swiveling round towards the south and then possibly back towards the west again towards the end of the 5-day period. So it is certainly a possibility that it does a full loop over itself without affecting any land areas. It is trending further west later on in its track, which means that it's less likely to affect the Azores in any way. There's Calvin shooting off towards the west-northwest, a decent pace. It's 15 miles per hour at the moment. It was faster earlier on, and then it will continue westwards there. It might hold on to some of that tropical storm strength over colder waters before reaching the big island of Hawaii in around 5 days' time. National Hurricane Center are expecting it will turn post-tropical at or around that landfall point, and you just about saw that next storm moving in there behind there as well, becoming a hurricane later on in the run. Into the Western Pacific, and what can we say, a big mess here. The first system, 4W, becoming a mature typhoon there, possibly category 3. A second system possible, but only the GFS showing that one moving through eastern China and the Korean Peninsula, and then a third one moving from Palau towards the northwest, which I think I would be most concerned about, and a fourth one which might form just west of the Philippines towards the end of day 5 and become a large system in the South China Sea. Well, it is July. Western Pacific absolutely has got the message. Looking at rainfall accumulations over that 7-day period, over the next 7 days, and you can see a big trail there from all 4 of these systems emerging there towards the end of that period. So a very wet time for large parts of the continent of Asia and the Philippine Islands, particularly with rainfall accumulations of up to 16 inches there. That's 400 millimeters on top of what's already occurred on Panay. On the Chinese peninsula towards Hainan, I think it's the Litsu Peninsula, 13 inches there, and out at sea we're looking at higher amounts, getting up towards 34 inches in one spot there, and over Palau 7 inches in the next 7 days. That is just over 150 millimeters. Northern Luzon as well, possibly getting 8 inches more. That's 200 millimeters on top of what's already happened. Well, Don goes for a second burst there. You just saw that briefly, and then it turns towards the northwest and off it goes into the night. And so that could well even be its strongest peak there. But watch over this little sneaky thing over there in the southwestern area there in the Western Caribbean. A brief spin-up storm from the GFS that goes on to affect Belize. I'm not sure whether that will happen yet, but I would keep an eye on it towards that 10-day period. Western Pacific, what on earth could happen next? Well, I'll tell you. A large system in the South China Sea which becomes a significant typhoon again for Vietnam, and then this big one behind it smacks into the Philippines there on the 24th as a probably category 3 or 4 typhoon, and then it moves on over into the South China Sea and becomes much larger in the process. Of course, that's still quite far out, but already concerns rising for this next system and maybe another little system off to its east as well. So the Western Pacific's really going right now. Scan the barcode and that will take you to the Force 13 merch store where we have all of our usual items. We need to get some more out there soon. And we also have our Still Waiting for Hone t-shirt. Western Pacific can get as active as it likes, but we still won't get a Hone, I don't think. Silly range. Look how large this Western Pacific typhoon becomes. Enormous over the South China Sea there, and strong as well. Probably a category 4 peak there before making landfall very close to where 4W is supposed to. That second system eventually moves on to Taiwan, and then maybe another system forming further east there. So the Western Pacific, my goodness, if all of this transpires, how many storms is that? I think that is 6 on the forecast. Which is just insane over the course of 16 days, maybe 7. That's extraordinary. You can talk about all of that though on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13 for tropical weather chat around the world. Of course, that last image there, that silly range, is very far out. I wouldn't believe it one bit just yet. Well, it was on this day where we had another big Western Pacific situation, a Category 5 landfall, and it was Typhoon Winnie, which made landfall in central Taiwan with winds of 175 miles per hour on July 15th, 1958. We also had Tropical Storm Betty, which I think span out of its banding next to the Philippines, a short-lived system, and Alice was spawning further east, which itself would also become a super typhoon as it moved towards the north. Tropical Depression 3B also had a short life just before making landfall in West Bengal, India. Well, back to today, and it's been breathless stuff. Don is the latest in the Atlantic now. The next name is Emily. In the Eastern Pacific, next up is Dora. And in the Central Pacific, of course, it is still Hone. Laughable, isn't it? 29 storms so far in 2023. In the Western Pacific, the next name should be upon us any time. We're just waiting for the Japanese Meteorological Agency. It's Talim. In the North Indian Ocean, it would be Tej, though no sign of that really yet in the next 2 weeks. And in the Southern Hemisphere, the Australian region, Jasper's next up. Southwest Indian Ocean will start its naming list with Alvaro this season. And the South Pacific, it will be Lola. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.